Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested by a viewer. Thanks to Christopher for this one. Amy plays Primal Surge, and Nick plays a Don't Blink in response. What happens? First, let's observe that Don't Blink only applies when a creature is entering the battlefield. This means that if any non-creature card is exiled with Primal Surge, then the resolution would proceed entirely normally. In the case of an instant or sorcery, it would stay exiled and the Primal Surge's resolution would end. Or in the case of a non-creature permanent card, Amy would choose whether to put it on the battlefield and repeat this process or have it stay exiled and end the resolution of Primal Surge. In the case Amy hits a creature card, she would have those same two choices. She could leave it exiled and end Primal Surge's resolution, or she could try to put it onto the battlefield and then exile the new top card. This time though, the Don't Blink will apply to what's happening. Rather than putting the creature card into play, it would end up getting shuffled into Amy's library. Don't Blink only says that the part where the creature card gets put onto the battlefield gets replaced though, so the rest would happen normally. Therefore, after Amy shuffles the card back into her library, she would exile the top card of her library and start the process over. Now, for those of you who are very familiar with Magic's rules, and especially tournament policy, that last part probably raised a bit of a red flag. Starting the process over almost sounds like a loop, right? And if that's the case, that could impact the choices available to Amy when she is deciding whether to continue the resolution of Primal Surge. So let's see what the Magic tournament rules have to say about this topic. This would be considered a non-deterministic loop because it involves shuffling the library and then making a decision based on what the top card is. As you can see, you cannot shortcut a non-deterministic loop. You have to play it out step by step. In this case, that would involve exiling the top card of Amy's library each time and either putting it into play, leaving it exiled, or shuffling it back into her library as appropriate. If Amy's library has no instants and sorceries in it, a mathematician would say that eventually Amy should get to a point where all of the non-creature permanents have been put onto the battlefield. But a judge wouldn't, because according to this rule, she has to stop if at any point in the process the game reaches a state that's identical in all relevant ways to one that has come up before. Unfortunately, this statement is a little bit ambiguous, and it's up to the head judge to determine what differences in the game state might be relevant or not. For example, I think we can all agree that if Amy exiles a Grizzly Bears, shuffles it in, and then hits Grizzly Bears again the next time, then that would be an identical game state, so she would have to stop performing the loop by choosing to leave the bear in exile. Most judges would say that's true even if Amy's playing multiple copies of Grizzly Bears and everybody knows that the second one she hit is a different physical card from the first, perhaps because it's signed or it's from a different set. But you could say that when she hits the second one, that should count as a different game state, since she now has given information to Nick that she has 2 copies of Grizzly Bears in her deck, which is information that he might not have had before. On the other hand, some people might think that as soon as you shuffle the creature back in and are about to exile the next card, that should count as repeating a game state, since you're about to exile a random card from your deck after having just done the same thing from the exact same pool of potential random outcomes. In the same vein, let's say that Amy hits a Grizzly Bears and then she hits a forest and puts it into play, and then she hits that same Grizzly Bears again. The game state is definitely different this time around because Amy has 1 more land in play and 1 less card in her library than the last time she hit that Grizzly Bears. But if you asked a bunch of Magic players whether there was any relevant difference between a game state where a player has 20 cards in their library and 10 forests in play versus one where the player has 19 cards in their library and 11 forests, most people would probably say no, especially if you didn't give them the context of the situation that we're considering. And then there's also a practical problem too. Who has to keep track of the game states that have come up before? What happens if that player makes a mistake? What happens if they just can't remember? What happens if the players don't agree? I know, let's call a judge and have the judge keep track. What a great idea. Judges are a lot more patient and have a lot better memories than the average person too, you see. So, well, as you can see, this is a lot more of a nuanced situation than it might have appeared at first glance. Still, I don't want to wuss out of giving my opinion just because the official answer is that the head judge gets to decide whatever seems most reasonable. So if this came up in a tournament and I was the head judge, I would say that Amy gets to keep going until she hits the same card twice without putting any new cards onto the battlefield in between. So Grizzly Bears, Hill Giant, Grizzly Bears would be game over, but Grizzly Bears, Forest, Hill Giant, Grizzly Bears would be okay to continue. I'm not bothered by the objection that exiling another random card after shuffling in and exiling from the same set of potential hits should count as repeating a game state, because my conception of a game state is a spot where the players can interact with the game. In other words, a state where the game is waiting on a player to make a decision. Anything that happens from the time that player makes that decision to the next decision point is internal to the working of the game, and not a game state. Lastly, even if Amy exiles two grizzly bears that are clearly two different physical cards, I would still count it as the same game state. So Amy would have to stop. But I would put the opponents in charge of catching when Amy repeats a card. And if they miss it, then Amy gets to keep going. Remember that putting a new card into play resets everything, which means that Amy has to shuffle her library before revealing each potential repeat. Given that, I don't foresee any issues where Amy might want to try to play really fast so that she could sneak in extra one by, which is definitely a concern in some similar types of situation. After I delivered that ruling to the players, I would also offer them a special proposal. If all the players in the game agree to it, I would allow Amy to just reveal her library to confirm there's no instance in sorceries. If this is indeed the case, I would let her shortcut this non-deterministic loop, even though the MTR technically doesn't support that, and jump straight to the mathematically correct theoretical end state where she gets all the non-creature permanents onto the battlefield and only has creatures left in her library. I mentioned this in my video on what happens when the board state is too complex to evaluate, but in situations like that, the best answer really comes down to problem solving, not rules and policy knowledge. You need to be looking for a resolution that gives all the players what they really want. On paper, this arrangement looks pretty good for Amy because she gets the guaranteed maximum number of permanents in play. It's good for Nick too because the result is pretty close to what would have probably happened anyway, except that he doesn't have to play the minigame of having to keep track of all Amy's hits, and he knows that Amy doesn't have any gas left in the tank after he plays his blot out the sky or whatever it is that he does have. Let's face it, if someone doesn't concede after you play a Primal Surge, there's no way they have nothing. As a judge, this would also be a big win for me too, because A, the game gets to the predictable final state of the loop, which is nice aesthetically, and B, it saves a ton of time. Even though this would officially be a deviation that all the players and the judge agree to is usually a good one. Finally, there's one more loose end that I want to talk about, and that is the question of jurisdiction. And truth be told, this is something that doesn't really get brought up enough when questions like this arise. Remember that line about how you can't just shortcut to the end of a non-deterministic loop? Well, that came from a document called the MTR, the Magic Tournament Rules. Now, here's the thing. Most of the time when people are playing a 10-mana sorcery, that's not going to be taking place in the context of a Magic tournament. So here's what I'm getting at. If you and your friends are playing at home, it doesn't really matter what me or anybody else thinks the right answer to any question like this is. The right answer is whatever you and your play group can agree on. Wizards of the Coast isn't going to send any Pinkerton agents to your house to take back your cards if they don't like how you play them. Probably. If you want to play things out step by step with 7 to 8 full riffle shuffles and a cut in between each reveal, go for it. If you want to skip straight to the end by having Amy just pull out all the non-creature cards like we talked about a while ago, great. And if you want to work out what the expected number of reveals is before a repeat, given the contents of Amy's library, and then have Amy get that many non-creature cards chosen at random, well, that's fine too. Especially when it comes to matters of tournament policy like this, there's no reason to be overly concerned with what the official answer is in a kitchen table game. Especially since that official answer probably got chosen on the basis of factors like timely finishing of a round and disincentivizing unsporting behavior, which may not have as much relevance in a more laid-back environment. Rather, I encourage you to use this official ruling as a starting point and decide among yourselves if it makes sense for you. As any good game master can tell you, if everybody in your party agrees to do things differently, there's no reason something silly like the rules should stand in your way. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.